I'm making this bag holder out of plywood. You could use hardwood too, that would work fine. I'm starting with some 1/4 inch plywood and I'm cutting out 2 pieces just 12 by 12 inches. These are going to be for the top and bottom plates of the bag holder. I'm also going to need some sides, and I'm using the 1/2 inch plywood for that, just ripping out a bunch of 3-inch strips. From those strips, I'm cutting out 2 pieces at 12 inches. These are going to be for the sides. I also need 2 pieces cut at 12.5 inches, and then these are going to be for the front and back. To connect all of these, I'm using dados, so I'm going to route out a 1/4 inch slot, which is a 1/4 inch from the end, and also a 1/4 inch tall on the back of all the pieces. Next, I'm going to route the ends of all the 12.5 inch pieces. The shorter 12-inch pieces don't need these. Next, I'm going to adjust the fence so that it's flush with the back of the router bit, and I'm going to finish off the dado on the ends of the 12.5 inch pieces first. So those are a 1/2 inch. And then leaving it in the same spot, I'm going to route the bottom of all of the pieces. So there will be a 1/4 inch dado flush on the bottom of all of them. Now for how the pieces connect together, we got the shorter 12-inch pieces that go on the side like that, and then the longer ones with the 1/2 inch dado, they overlap on the front and back like this. Now we also need space for the sliding top. Now on one of the side pieces, this has to slide through. It just has that extra space on the top, that tab that we have to trim off. Before gluing together, we need some dados for dividers. So I'm routing 4 1/4 inches from the left side of the 12.5 inch pieces. Once again, these are 1/4 inch slots. Next, I'm routing 3 7/8 inches from either end of the front piece. This will roughly divide it into 3 segments. Now to actually assemble the main box, it's going to be glued and pin nailed together, and I'm starting with the sides, just going around and slowly gluing and pinning all of these in place, because it's much easier to get these in place and then fit the bottom panel, especially because if the bottom panel is too large, it's much easier to trim that panel rather than trying to resize the side pieces. With the box assembled, I have to check the top panel to make sure this slides in and out easily. Next, I have to draw out space for holes for the bags, and for these there's going to be 1 slot on the left hand side, which is going to be vertical, and then on the right hand side there's going to be 3 running horizontally. These are all about 2 inches wide with 1-inch borders, if that makes it easier. In order to route these out, I'm ripping out a bunch of 3/4 inch plywood pieces to use as guides, and I'm using CA glue to temporarily glue these in place, although I think I ended up using a little too much CA glue because it was a bit of a pain to actually remove all this. But keep in mind you could use this to make a template instead of this being the final piece. After drilling some starter holes, I'm using my router with a flush trim bit in order to route out all of these slots, just gliding the bearing along those guides underneath. Now another option here, instead of using a router, would just be cutting these out like a jigsaw would actually be a great option. To remove the guides, you just have to smack them out of place, but mine were a little stubborn, so I also used a chisel to help. Like I said, I used a little too much CA glue, so I did have to do a lot of sanding to get this looking clean. Next, I have this front part, which is a little short. I'm actually going to use a chamfer to clean this up, just ripping this down at a 30-degree angle on the table saw, just slowly taking multiple passes until I get a chamfer that goes all the way across that top part like this. This is way easier than actually trying to measure that top piece to make sure it's perfect. Next, I need the dividers that are going to fit inside here, separating that large slot and then the 3 smaller ones. I'm ripping out 2-inch strips from the 1/4-inch plywood to make these dividers. I need dados on the longer vertical divider, and they actually have to match up with the right hand side, which the router table is still set up at the right distance for that, so all I had to do is adjust the height so I could add a couple shallow dados on this piece. Now the last thing, of course, is just to sand down all of the pieces before adding any finish, which I ended up not adding finish on mine because I haven't decided yet whether I want it to be clear like water-based polyurethane or if I want to stain it with some kind of Danish oil. But either way, without stain, it works perfectly fine as it is right now.